Okay, I think, wow, it's been a long time since I spoke to 99 people. So thank you for coming today. Michael Furmanovsky at Ryukoku University, and I'm talking about a task-based approach to designing effective reading circles. And I'm the kind of guy who makes my PowerPoints a little bit sort of standalone, so everything's in them. So you can leave at any time, and I've already uploaded my video. So sorry for very intensive slides, which at the moment are not working. Okay, there we go. So here are the main goals of my presentation. And let me just see if I can minimize this. No, I can't. Okay, so I've been doing reading circles for about 12 years now, adapted from literature circles. And this is when you have multiple copies of the same set of graded readers. And I don't know what to call this, so I've decided to use the expression modified ER, because it really isn't extensive reading, but it's also not intensive reading. And that actually is what my presentation is going to be partly about. So it's to raise the issue of how ER and IR can be made part of a more expansive curriculum. And basically what I'm talking about is how ER and IR can play nice together. So I'm interested in how ER and IR can be integrated so we don't have this binary dichotomy between the two. And I've noticed that a lot of people who've been talking this morning have been doing stuff that is pretty much extended IR, if you like. That's another way to look at it, modified ER, extended IR. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And at the same time, this presentation was originally for task-based learning. So a lot of what I'm going to be doing today is task-based learning. Okay, so I'm having problems going to the next slide. There we go. So over the years, I've been thinking about, ER and issues in ER. And what I'm going to say, there'll be a lot of people that might disagree with me, but these are the things that I see as being issues.
Michael, I'm not disagreeing with you yet, but it looks like we're not seeing your slides the way you might think we are.
Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to this.
Okay, you can't start the presentation, it's not working?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, if you start, because I think you're in the yep.
You can see that, right?
No, it's not opening.
Yeah, then can you see this?
I think you're sharing the wrong window.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll
need to share if you stop sharing, share the other presentation window.
What about now?
No.
Well,
there should be a choice when you go to the second share window. There's a choice of different windows to share.
Desktop, and then there's Microsoft PowerPoint. So there's my PowerPoint there.
But there should be another PowerPoint window. If you start your PowerPoint, and then start sharing, and it should share.
Okay, then. So I'll stop sharing, and then I'll go to the PowerPoint and start it, and then. How about now?
Right, yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so these are some comments about ER in general. Okay, so the first thing to say is that we have to face the fact that intensive reading is the norm, and it's going to stay that way. And also, a lot of people, when they give presentations, they don't talk about when they do their ER, in what context is it? Is it in a 4 skills class? Is it in a dedicated reading class? So this is one of my gripes about presentations when people do them, that we need to know the context. Another thing is that, Rob Waring and Tom have done such a great job. We don't really need to justify ER anymore. We've won that battle in a sense, okay? Also, we have to acknowledge that ER by itself has as many deficiencies as IR by itself. They both have their strong and weak points. And so we need to really work together. ER and IR need to really play nice. So that's really the context of this presentation. All right, now I'm not able to go to the next slide for some reason. Oh, there we go. So here are some of my issues in current ER programs. One is there isn't enough coordination, as I've mentioned, between intensive and extensive reading. In my view, a lot of people disagree, too much emphasis on speed reading. Another issue is that ER tends to work best with the most motivated students and diligent students, often for female students. Another thing is, if we're reading different books, there isn't enough intrinsic reason to communicate with each other, which is one of the reasons I gravitated to reading circles. Another thing is there's a lack of contemporary topics. I know Paul will point out that there are a lot, but still maybe 60% of the best books are 19th century, early 20th century novels. And, this is a problem, I think. Another thing is, if you tend to be a sort of a purist ER, then you're not going to give students much feedback or correction. And I think, they kind of like it. Using Google Classroom has made it so easy to give feedback. Okay, I'm having problems going to the next slide. So there we go. Here's, let me just see if I can move this a little bit. Here's a list of IR weaknesses that Rob Waring has identified in several of his presentations. So I won't read this list, but you've probably seen this if you've attended Rob's fantastic presentations. He's done a great job of talking about, the weaknesses of IR, particularly when it comes to vocabulary acquisition. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen this list or something like it before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, is this, does this really apply to today's situation? Because when Rob made this list, he made it maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I know he's updated. So let me continue. Yeah, I'm not getting, let's try clicking in the screen. So here's that same list again. And then in one column, you see my view of whether this is accurate for the older texts and for the newer texts. Again, this is just my opinion. So for the older text, I think pretty much all of his comments are germane. I've put a little batsu, a red batsu, meaning it's a valid critique. And then a green, meaning I have some doubts as to whether that's a valid critique of the latest books. So, we have to give credit to the intensive reading textbook makers. They're improving enormously in their stuff, right? Of course, a lot of the things still apply. It's short passages. It tends to be a bit difficult. But I think we need to stop stereotyping the deficiencies of intensive reading. Now I'm going to introduce reading circles. So again, reading circles is where students are reading the same book, and I will explain the mechanics of that in a moment. But on the left, you've got the pure ER, and on the right, you've got the reading circles. So over the years, I've been thinking to myself, am I actually doing extensive reading, or is this really something quite different? And my conclusion is that it is somewhere in the middle, and then that might be a good thing. It's part of this idea of having a more expansive kind of ER. Okay, so I won't read through this. You can just take a look at it, and you can look at my presentation on YouTube. There are some overlaps, but obviously doing a lot less reading. If one book in 3 weeks, I would say that we're doing 10 times more reading than with IR, but 5 times less reading than with ER. Okay. But on the other hand, no tests. So there is some overlap. Here's a picture of students holding books that they read in the class. So you can see they're all holding different books, but the way I do it now is it's the same books and they've got different books as well. And I will explain that. Okay. Now, one of the things about reading circles, which goes against ER principles, is that I'm the person who's chosen the books. So I've been doing this for more than 12 years. And over the years, I've sort of come down to a list of maybe 20 books, which students always like, never have any bad reactions to, and also which have content, because I teach in the Kokusai Gakubu, and we talk about, issues like, history, race, gender, and so on. So I want to have books that have genuine content. And so here are 8, which I particularly like. A lot of them are prize winners within ER. I'm sure the experts know about these. They're all level 3s, and I know there are differences between the level 3s of different publishers, but I think those levels are not enormous. They're all between 9 and 12,000 words and between 12 and 1,500 head words. Now, we have a streaming at my university for the first years, 3 levels. The lower 2 levels will tend to use level 2 books with a few level 3s. I teach the higher levels, it's all level 3s, but no level 4s. Although the Anne Frank book is pretty close to being a level 4 book. Okay. So reading circles as modified ER. So here are 5 questions that I'm sort of addressing in this presentation. So first, of course, what are reading circles? I'll explain it carefully. Are they compatible with ER? How do they fit into the curriculum? How do they fit into a reading syllabus? How do we assess them? And what are the main issues in reading them? So a little bit of background, they come out of literature circles, as some of you probably know. I adapted what Mark Furr did with Oxford a long time ago. He had 6 roles for the students in the reading circle. I've cut that down to 3 or 4 roles. They're in groups of 3 or 4, and then they'll read the same book, and then they'll exchange, okay? So I had to actually order multiple copies of the book. They're not in the library. The library's got a huge collection of other graded readers, but I create a class set. So it's quite complicated how I do that. I order it through the Seikyo, and students come in and they pay the same amount of money, and they're given one of these reading circle books, okay? And so they're doing it in class for 15 to 30 minutes. And, compared with pure ER, they're reading a lot less. Now, for homework or later on in the year, I get them to read a lot of books in the library as well. But I'm talking here just about the reading circles. Okay. Anything I missed there? All right. Are they compatible with ER principles? Well, so in green, that is they are. They involve reading at a level that's close to the student's actual level, although there's going to be some students in the class for whom it's going to be slightly difficult, and quite a number for whom it's going to be quite easy. Okay, they're going to do a lot more reading than in an intensive IR class, obviously, but a lot less than in ER. And it's going to be student-centered, and there's going to be discussion. But on the other side, as I said before, the levels will not be lower necessarily for all students. They'll be lower for most, and they're reading a lot less. Okay, somebody's raised a hand. I don't know if that's relevant. Also, in terms of looking up vocabulary, that's not going to be that necessary. I go with the 5 fingers principle too. So if I was to ask my students how many words on a page do you not know, it would be rare for there to be more than 4, and it would be rare for there to be 0. So it's pretty much all between the 1 and the 3 range. Okay. Right. Okay, so those are my ideas about that. How does it fit into the curriculum? Well, I do it mostly, I'm in charge of the whole curriculum, and I'm taking care of the part-timers. So it's done mostly in the first year syllabus, in which English is taught 5 times a week. So there is already a dedicated IR class, which can be taught by a Japanese teacher or a native speaker with a regular IR class. Okay, so these are my thoughts about people who have, English is a 4 skills class only. You've got to think about how do you integrate reading circles or ER in general in a 4 skills class. And this is something that people don't talk about a lot when they give their presentations. They don't say the context in which they're doing this. Is it a 4 skills class? Is it a reading class? Is it mostly homework? Is it done with 2nd year or 3rd year students? Does the curriculum go from 1st to 3rd year with ER, or is it just in the 1st year? Okay. We need to know what classes our students are taking. What are the other classes they're taking so that we don't duplicate? So how does it fit into a reading syllabus? So in my case, it's a dedicated ER class in which students have an IR class at the same time. But it could also be just a supplementary activity, right? So again, it would be very interesting for me to know what other people are doing. Are you in a 4 skills context? Are you in a reading context? Is it a reading writing class and then it's mostly homework? We're all different, I think. Okay, so assessment. So my assessment is quite a complicated one, and I'm going to be showing it to you. It involves worksheets that students do, and they submit this at Google Classroom. And if you look in the red, you can see how it's assessed. So there's a background content question, there's a vocabulary question, a character description, a letter, diary, or interview with a character, and a review of the book. And okay, what are the main issues in using reading circles? So you've got to make some quite difficult decisions in your institution based on how many English classes you have, what you perceive as the weaknesses of the students, the strength of the library, and so on. Other difficulties are, choosing titles based on limited information about student levels. I've been doing it for 12 years. I know our student levels. Another big issue is having multiple copies. Our library doesn't allow multiple copies of graded readers. So that's one of the reasons why I went to this thing where students buy the books and we have a class library. Another thing is just explaining how reading circles work. It takes quite a lot of explanation. Also, my worksheets are quite complicated. I'm going to show them to you in a moment. Explaining that is quite difficult too. Okay, then there's all of the issues about less than responsible students. Now, there's not a whole lot of time, so I'm going to go. This shows a kind of a system for how I do the rotation of the reading circles where they exchange books. Obviously, exchanging books was difficult when we did online. They had to send them to each other instead of giving them to each other in class. Here's one of the worksheets for the word master where they have to, it's kind of self-explanatory there. Okay, that's the word master. This is adapted from the original literature circles. This is the personality and character worksheet. You can only see one here. There's only one, but actually they're going to do 3. And here's some of the words that they can use. Of course, they can choose their own words. And this is the one for culture and background. And again, I'd be happy to share this with anybody who's interested. This is the combined worksheet that they have to do. It's too small for you to see it. So what I'm going to do in the next slide is show it a little bit closer up. This is continuing it. This is all submitted at Google Classroom, Google Docs. Okay, so here's looking at it a little bit closer. Just take a look at that. You can read it quicker than I can say it. Okay, and these are examples over here. Okay. This is the part where they have to choose one of these things. And again, it's taken me 10 years to come up with this format. And I borrowed things from, the extensive reading journal and from some of our kami-samas in the group. And here's my concluding comments. So, extensive reading is now a standard component of EFL curricula all over Japan, but we don't really need to fight this battle anymore. We've got to figure out how to fit it in neatly. The case has been proved. So we need to focus on the curriculum. We need to find ways to integrate E&R, IR together. And then finally, with the pandemic, all of us have been looking for online stuff. I have become a big fan of Newsela. I used to be a big fan of Breaking News, ER Central, but Newsela has kind of taken over for me. And that basically is it. So it's now 12:45. And so I think it's breakout rooms now?
Okay, thank you, Michael. And thank you for excellent time management. And thank you for sharing your over 10 years work generously to us, a room of your choice. Okay, so either you go by yourself or have us send you there. Okay. And